The question of free will versus determinism is ancient, persistent, and central to our understanding of ourselves and the universe. If God exists, and if God possesses the attribute of omniscience, perfect, complete knowledge of past, present, and future, how can human beings genuinely possess free will? This question has troubled theologians, philosophers, and ordinary individuals for centuries. After all, if God already knows what we will choose before we choose it, does that not make our choices inevitable? The implications of this dilemma are profound. Our entire system of morality, justice, and personal responsibility seems to rest on the idea that we are free to choose our actions. If our choices are predetermined, how can we be held accountable for them? This essay will explore both sides of this complex issue, examining arguments for and against the compatibility of divine omniscience and human free will. We will delve into the nuances of philosophical positions like compatibilism and open theism, which attempt to reconcile these seemingly contradictory concepts. Finally, we will explore the views of prominent philosophers who have grappled with this question, from Augustine to contemporary thinkers. Ultimately, this essay will argue that while the relationship between omniscience and free will remains a complex and multifaceted problem, it is not an insurmountable one. There are ways to understand God's foreknowledge that do not necessarily negate the possibility of genuine human choice. The argument against the compatibility of omniscience and free will often begins with a simple premise. If God knows everything, then God knows the future. This knowledge, the argument continues, implies a fixed future. Just as we cannot change the past, we cannot change the future that God already knows. Our choices, therefore, are not truly free, but are predetermined. To illustrate this point, consider the analogy of a film reel. Imagine God as an observer who has already seen the entire film of your life. God knows every choice you will make, every action you will take from beginning to end, just as the characters on the screen have no choice but to act out the scenes as they are recorded. So too, it seems, are our lives predetermined by God's foreknowledge. This deterministic view raises serious concerns about moral responsibility. If our actions are predetermined, can we be held accountable for them? The legal system, for example, relies heavily on the concept of mens rea, the guilty mind, which presupposes a degree of free will in choosing to commit a crime. If God's omniscience negates free will, the foundation of our justice system, and indeed our entire understanding of right and wrong, is called into question. The deterministic argument is compelling in its simplicity, but as we shall see, it is not without its weaknesses. The next section will explore counter-arguments that attempt to reconcile divine foreknowledge with genuine human freedom. Those who believe in the compatibility of omniscience and free will offer several counter-arguments to the deterministic view. One prominent perspective is compatibilism, which argues that free will and determinism are not mutually exclusive. Compatibilists maintain that even if our actions are predetermined, we can still be said to act freely as long as our actions are caused by our own desires, beliefs, and values. Imagine, for instance, that you offer a friend her favorite ice cream flavor, chocolate. You know she loves chocolate and will undoubtedly choose it over any other flavor. In a sense, her choice is predetermined by her pre-existing preference. However, this does not mean she is not choosing freely. Her choice is still an expression of her own desire, even if that desire is predictable. Another perspective, known as open theism, proposes that God's omniscience does not necessarily entail a fixed future. Open theists suggest that God's knowledge of the future is not like our knowledge of the past, fixed and unchangeable. Instead, God's knowledge of the future is dynamic and responsive to the choices we make. In this view, God knows all possible futures and how our choices will influence the course of events. But God does not know with absolute certainty which future will come to pass. This perspective preserves human free will while acknowledging God's unique knowledge and involvement in human affairs. The debate over free will and omniscience has raged within philosophical circles for centuries. Augustine of Hippo, a prominent early Christian theologian, argued that God's foreknowledge does not preclude human freedom. Augustine believed that God exists outside of time and therefore perceives the entirety of history simultaneously. From God's eternal perspective, all moments are equally present and our choices, while free, are fully known to God. This view influenced Christian thought for centuries. However, other philosophers, such as the 17th century thinker René Descartes, emphasized the distinction between God's infinite power and human free will. Descartes believed that God freely chose to create a world in which humans have genuine freedom, even though God could have chosen to create a deterministic universe. In the 20th century, philosophers like Alvin Plantinga and William Lane Craig have defended the compatibility of omniscience and free will using modal logic, a system that explores the relationship between possibility and necessity. These philosophers argue that just because God knows what we will choose does not mean we could not have chosen otherwise. The debate continues to this day with no easy answers. However, the enduring nature of this philosophical puzzle underscores its importance to our understanding of both the divine and the human.